Well, hello, Gasper viewers, and welcome back to yet another update on our race car. As the title says, I think after some retrospectives, we figured out that we actually ended up buying the wrong car back in August. And when I say wrong car, I don't necessarily mean the wrong platform. However, there are a few details, very important details, that we were not aware of when we were buying the car, and I will spend the next 10-15 minutes getting into a little bit more detail behind it. So let's just jump right in. Over the last 90 days, we've been documenting the build. We bought the car in August 2023. Spent the next 3 to 4 weeks stripping the interior of the car, and then brought it over to a couple of our friends, Mitch Piper for work on the cage, and Dale Daimler to work on the engine and refreshing the engine components. So I have some videos for that, and I will add them into the description if you'd like to take a look. A little bit of history about the N52 engine. It was BMW's last naturally aspirated inline six-cylinder engine. Its predecessor was M54 that was produced between model years 2000 and 2006. And the main improvements of the N52 versus the older M54 was that the engine block incorporated magnesium composite with aluminum core, save weight, and the water pump is now electrically versus mechanically driven. The N52 engine comes in two different configurations and power outputs: the 2.5 liter, obviously with the lower horsepower and torque outputs, and then the 3-liter configuration. And the N52 engine was produced between 2006 and 2007. It was then replaced starting, I think, as early as the 2014 model year with a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine that's called N20. So what are the main differences between the N52, which is what we thought we were getting, and the N51 engine? Well, the N52 and N51 engines are very similar, but the N51 engine is a slightly detuned and more ecologically and emission-wise friendly engine. Here are a couple bullet points about the changes in the engine itself. Mechanically, the biggest difference is the compression rate, which was dropped from 10.721 to 1021. And then it has some other additional engine components related to the crankcase ventilation, specifically this labyrinth that I have another slide on to share a little bit more about what that is and where that sits in the engine. But what it does, it allows you to better separate the exhaust gases and the oil before it gets released out into the air, so that the oil gets released back into the oil pan and the engine gases go into the manifold, and that pretty much. We ended up with the N51 engine. Of course, we didn't realize that when we were buying the car. We didn't even know there's an N51 version of the engine, so we didn't check for that. And unfortunately, we got the short stick. The N51 engines, probably California was the first state, I have to assume, that forced the manufacturers, BMW here specifically, to come up with this N51 designation. But there were also other states on the East Coast, Maryland and Pennsylvania, if I remember correctly, that also had more stringent. So this is what the just a cut through of the engine and a diagram that shows the process of the crankcase ventilation. Here is the crankcase, and then as the crankcase air is sucked into towards the manifold using valve and some intricate system that's been designed specifically for this engine. The N51 engine adds this labyrinth, which is this part over here, and as you can see, as the gases move up from the crankcase. Looks like it's meant to slow down the movement of the air and potentially start releasing some of the oil, to catch some of that oil and release it back into the crankcase. It then continues here. This is the cyclone oil separator, and then looks like the air then gets sucked in, and the valve facilitates this negative pressure, and then the air and all the unspent gases then travel back into the manifold where they are being burned. So this was an interesting update for me. I was not aware that how this actually functions before today. So hopefully this was interesting for you as well. Okay, slightly looking back at our August 2023 buy date, we were focusing on the 320i rear-wheel drive cars. Of course, we didn't want a four-wheel drive car, and we wanted to make sure we're getting the 3-liter engine, so we were focusing on the 320i models. We were loosely following the Condor Speed Shop E9X spec build. This is a NASA specific class E9X spec that at this point is mainly running the NASA's southeast region, so in the Florida, Georgia area. And if you have a E92 or a E90, there is a spec list that you can follow and participate in that series. We were not interested in the NASA spec class, but we were following that build sheet because it has a recommended list of various either enhancements as it relates to safety and performance, as well as some preventative maintenance that you should do to the engine, suspension, and other components in order to get the car ready for racing. Well, what we didn't realize when we were following the spec sheet is that there is actually a slightly more powerful version of the engine already available, and it's the N52 high output engine, which is the N52B30O1 designation engine that came off of the 330, and I have another slide that shows some of the output differences, which are pretty significant. We've already talked about the N51B30 engine that we bought inadvertently, and the other disappointment was when we were doing the maintenance on the automatic. We found out that it was the GM produced one and not the ZF produced automatic. So we shall see how many cycles we'll get out of the GM transmission. Maybe it's going to be a pleasant surprise and it will last us a year or more. And when it goes to the GM heaven, we're going to replace it with the ZF transmission. So a quick look at the spec differences. The 328 SULEV is on the left-hand side, and the 330i on the right-hand side. I am getting slightly different numbers based on whether you go to Wikipedia or other sites. So these may not be 100% accurate, and I think actually for the 320i SULEV, the horsepower is closer to 225. So peak horsepower 225 at around 6.1 thousand RPM, 6.1 thousand RPM, and 200 foot-pounds of torque at 2.7 thousand RPMs. The 330, as you can see, is significantly higher, and you gain about 40 horses and 40 foot-pounds of torque, which is significant when you're only making 225. Here's the engine designation. This is the N51B30, and the 330i one is N52B30O1, stands for High Output O1. They also have different ECUs, so in order for us to go to the higher output and have it and be able to take advantage of the 3-stage intake manifold that we already have, we need to upgrade our ECU from the MSV 80.1, which means that this is a SULEV designation, to MSV 80. Obviously, compression is not going to change, and we're not going to be able to hit these numbers, but it's a relatively minor difference in compression, and again, based on some research, it probably is going to rob us of 7 to 10 horsepower. So we're okay with that. Okay, so now what? 2 weeks ago, we went to Summit Point to do our first shakedown test. And to our surprise, the car ran. We ran it for about 4 hours. Out of the 4 hours, maybe 2.5 we were really stressing the car during that time, and we had no issues other than the car eating a little bit of oil, about a half a quart in the 4 hours. So we need to keep an eye on it as we go racing next year to make it run out of oil. We also obviously had some of the items that were removed from the car, like the airbags, the secondary air system, and the radiator temp sensor, as part of the SULEV, have been coated out. And I have a video here, and I'll add that into the description that highlights our shakedown session. So what do we do now? Well, we were actually considering adding the diff because we feel like the gearing is perhaps a little bit tall with the automatic, but once we started digging into it and looking at a 4.1 diff, it was going to take up a considerable amount of our remaining budget. So we decided to do what any responsible racer should do, and that was to focus on power. So since we already have the 3-stage intake manifold, there is nothing else that we need to do. We already have the appropriate manifold to take advantage of the additional power. We are going to buy, actually already bought the stainless steel headers that Condor Speed Shop down in Florida make for this platform. Probably going to go forward with a muffler delete. And mainly that's just for power, for weight savings, because the muffler is supposed to be fairly heavy, somewhere around 30 to 40 pounds, perhaps even a little bit more. And we need to upgrade the DME to the MSV80 version. So we need to find a 2011 330 and then install that DME and have it coated. I'll do a separate video on the coating. And then if we do a tune later, we will also do a separate video on that. Potentially, we'll go to a 3-inch race exhaust because a lot of the race tunes do rely on the 3-inch exhaust, which I think compared to the car that as it is today, it's 2.5-inch exhaust. So that's going to give us a little bit more throughput. So we'll probably go to that and then do a race tune. So what's next for us? Here we are, middle of December. We're looking at a March date. So what do we have to do between now and then? Well, we need to upgrade the suspension. We're still running the OEM suspension, and we need to put in camber plates. We decided to go with the MCS one-way non-remotes. We're going to get those from Beamer World, as well as camber plates. We're not going to refresh the entire suspension, all the kinematics, the arms, on the front and the rear. We are gonna, however, we're gonna upgrade the front control arm with one from an M3, and Turner produced monoball bushings. So we already got that from Turner Motorsports. And the rear trailing arm is stamped metal currently on the car. So FCP Euro has this ref shift billet aluminum trailing arm that we're going to install as well. We'll then install the headers. We need to work on the DME and do a dyno so that we have a baseline. We can validate that everything is working. If there is budget and if there is time, we might do a race tune on it as well. But that's TBD. We plan to participate in AER races next year. However, it looks like that first date, it's a late March date, may not work for us. That's a pit race. So we're looking at an alternative going down to VIR. I think it's just the south portion of VIR that they run, but there's a Champ Car 12-hour race. It's a 1 day only. It's about 4.5 hours for most of us that live here in Northern Virginia. So this would be a really good shakedown. And make sure that all the work that we would have done over the winter is copacetic, and the car is happy. So we will provide more updates probably as soon as the week of Christmas, as we start working on installing the suspension. And if you have got any questions about the build, post them down below.